is if we start off with Gianfranco, and very quickly, because I know everyone's getting a little bit peckish and tea and biscuits is not enough at times. You just give us the top 3 things that your group thought were the biggest priority for the FT.
Okay, so we talked a lot, but if we need to summarize the 3, the first point would be the focus on services that enable the now. It's a bit of, sounds like a slogan, but it's all about giving an immediate idea to users of what the price is, the fare is, the timetable, the arrival time, the traffic, and all of the experience that is something that today perhaps we are experiencing and learning from other models like on-demand cars, for example. The second point that I personally appreciated a lot is around creating and enabling a forum for all of the players that have a stake into this conversation can keep meeting and conversing and discussing. And we want to actually to thank DFT to make this process itself in the open, which is not something we see every day. So can we keep this open? Can we allow operators to be able to talk to the application developers perhaps anytime and easily share their needs and opinions? And the third point is a bit of a reminder that the data describes the bus system, not the other way around. So the problem is improving the bus system and then perhaps improving the data. Data should not be the silver bullet that solves everything. At the same time, can enable many of those services to be realized, but let's keep focus on the service itself first.
Fantastic. Temi?
Great. So my table, we had 3 main points, but all 3 points had one very similar theme, which was standards and regulations. So the first point was that source data and data accuracy was very important, and that the traffic commissioner standards were not always necessarily compatible with like local authority systems and journey planning. So having a set standard across the UK would be useful. Again, regulations and partnerships, but this time between operators and local authorities. So knowing what standards need to be met and what local authorities expect of bus operators and what bus operators need from local authorities. So more of like collaboration in that respect. And then the third one was a national standard and guidance for recording disruptions and timetable changes, which is not the case currently. So a bus operator will let their customers know in one particular way what's happening with the 94 bus, and another bus operator will do it another way. So the theme is standards and regulations at national level for local authorities and operators with the input of the community.
Thank you. Amit. Come on. Oh.
We sort of broke the rules, so we've got top four things. Sorry, Paul, but so first of these is we don't, as part of the secondary legislation, we don't want new technologies, new processes, new hubs. There's stuff already out there, so let's work at least initially on consistency and standardization of data requirements, data standards, etc. One of the examples we spoke quite a bit about was NAPTAN. So let's look at standardizing approaches to that. Second point is about responsibility and accountability. So in the legislation, we need to be really clear about where are the cut-off points and the interactions between operators and local authorities. Third bit is the industry is on board. So there's a lot of support, there's a lot of movement already amongst operators. Not all, but many are already doing stuff in this space. We're all here today. So there is a lot of support in the industry for what's happening. And then finally, we think the legislation needs to include support for some of the smaller operators who may not find it as easy to meet some of the legislation as the larger ones. So if that means monetary support or otherwise, then that's fine.
Thank you. Mira. No, Amit and Neil were together.
Okay, right, that's fine. Sorry. Hello. That's our table, just at the back. So we had a nice, interesting mix of we had trapeze on the table. We had local authority representation and operators. And I think from some of the key messages, I'm going to also break your rules too, Paul. Some of the key messages were so actually we had a really some good examples of some of the work taking place in Norfolk, Norwich, Essex about the so obviously the local authority purchasing the software such as Trapeze or Omnibus, whatever it might be, and actually the local authority providing a bureau service to access EBSR, so that would automatically meet the route and timetable requirement and becomes more accessible for the small to medium-sized operators who might still be doing paper-based registration, not have access to expensive software. So that bureau service suggestion was really welcome. I think there was quite a clear feeling that we really do need to mandate in the regs the role of the local authorities, and that if they're going to maintain the NAPTAN data, they might as well just maintain the data. But that needs to be provided, that needs to be stipulated in the regs, and without that, there's a risk that that might not happen. That it would be it would ultimately leave it as a decision to be made by the local authorities, and if their budgets are cut, then they might just cut that service. So that was a really clear message that came out for us. I think one of the other big messages that came out was the fact that we need a NetX profile, so that was a really welcome message. I think that we need a profile, we need a standard for fares and tickets, but actually what we need is a UK profile for NetX. The industry needs to be involved in the development of it. There needs to be a realistic timetable for moving to it, and ultimately it shouldn't be a burden for the industry to work with a NetX profile. And then we talked a little bit about small operators as well, and the different types of support or help that they might need. So talking about is it an access issue? So is it that they don't have the hardware, the software, or is it the capability? So that needs to be, so we need to mandate in the regs that we're going to go digital by default, but we need to also, as Neil said, include in there some of the measures that might be available to smaller operators to help them comply with that. So I think there are key messages. Have I missed anything? No? Okay, super. I'll take
Sorry,
that.
Miro, could you just, your second point, could
Yeah.
you just give us it in one sentence so I can summarise?
What was my second point? So we've got the bureau service and NetX profile small operators. Oh, so it's stipulating in the regs the role of the local authorities. So I think it's just, I think we just say we just need to stipulate the role of the local authorities in the regs. So it needs to be legally mandated.
And that is, there's money attached to that?
So
Because it's great saying you're responsible with no money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what I would say is if you look at the moment, the way the local authorities work, a number of local authorities have got real-time information systems. That's because government run funding competitions, and through the local sustainable transport fund have basically made money available for the local authorities to spend on transport improvement. So, I think we are alive to that, and we know that potentially there'll be a need for state aid and money at some point down the line.
Cool. Okay. Sherry?
So some of the key things from my group, first one was about quality assurance in terms of what app developers put out. So there were some concerns that there's a potential for maybe some misuse or misrepresentation of operators' data, and therefore that could have some adverse impacts in their passenger numbers. So we need to probably think about maybe operators should have some sort of level of control. That's something we need to think about. Don't know if
or not.
Need to be clearly stated. So that's something we need to think about. Second thing was about fares, and obviously making all fares data available is going to be initially quite a large resource and a big project for some operators. So before we mandate any requirements, we need to think about the resources that are available to each operator, because it differs quite largely. And the third thing was about not reinventing the wheel. So Travelline, was a lot of support for Travelline on my table, and it works well. but there was acknowledgement that there is currently too many steps in the process, so that could be simplified, but overall it does work and we shouldn't be trying to reinvent anything.
Excellent. I'll just make a point. Is it that big a task to publish fares data?
Publishing fares data is not a big task. Publishing fares data that's meaningful.
Yeah. Or you could say you look at our web service to
Give it today, but you don't, how would you interpret it?
The model is not the contents of the model.
Yeah. But I think that's... In London we had a long conversation around fares. In Birmingham we had a long conversation about EBSR. Here, this conversation is a bit more broader. It's quite interesting how things... different people are focused on different things. But that... I think that meaningful and that process around publishing is really great because we're thinking ahead. So, yeah, great. Toby.
Right, so I secretly named our group #TeamToby. So 3 things that we talked about that's kind of been touched upon. Standards. So we've got stuff out there at the moment. We want to kind of build on that and define that and make that more useful. The other thing was data quality. So we talked about how if an operator supplies data to a local authority, which then goes through to Travelline, that kind of cleanses it at each level. So that's something that we're probably doing quite well at the moment. But then we also talked about NAPTAM being quite complicated and how that can cause some data quality issues. And the third thing that we talked about was future-proofing. So we need to think about when DFT are implementing things, how are we making sure that it's changeable fairly quickly. So we talked about some new technologies that are coming through, like blockchain. So if that starts to play a role in open data in any way, how would we make sure that, if we're assigning blockchains to things?
Aside from all the energy that it uses to,
It was an example,
yeah.
theoretically.
Yeah. Good. But the point around future-proofing and not locking ourselves into, and that's the beauty of being open. So we would say that being open helps you do that. So last group is Tom.
Right. My favourite thing in our group was we came up with an example of open data failing. So we need to keep that in mind through this process. The example was, what if we start publishing fares as open data, people develop apps, and then someone gets on a bus thinking it's going to be one price and it's actually more. They're going to be pretty furious. And Google aren't exactly perfect at using the current open data, and they're likely to be a big provider of fares data, so that is something to keep an eye on and avoid. Second point was to continue and support existing forums and systems for collaboration, same as Sherry's already said. Don't need to reinvent a lot of this stuff, it already exists, let's not reinvent it. And the third one was standards and regulation need to work together. So for example, if we start defining the NetX UK profile as a standard, but it doesn't define things in the profile that later become required by regulation, or vice versa, regulation requires things that an already set standard cannot accommodate, then we're in a world of pain. So let's not do that.
No, let's not do it. Thanks very much. So I think we give ourselves a round of applause for that. And then just a final call for anyone who has any other passionate things that they want to say or share in this document. You can obviously join in afterwards if there's something that comes to you on the way home on the bus. You could get on your phone and amend this, or if there's stuff that you're going back on the train or wherever, or your colleagues want to make a comment, please do that. But if there's anyone in the room now wants to make a point,